The leg pull and prone series of exercises is a great introduction to, but also a variation upon the traditional plank. Now, plank is kind of thought of as a very common core strengthening exercise, and indeed it is a good one to perform, providing that the foundations of the position you end up in are good. And this is where we get into being able to recruit muscles a little bit more efficiently. So I think it's a great set of exercises for increasing your awareness of and the facilitation of your abdominal muscles. So crudely speaking, the abdominal muscles sit between your rib cage and your belt line. And it's worth thinking about those two lines in your body when it comes to executing the leg pull and prone and the preparation for that movement. So all of that will become clear when we get down onto the mat. It's performed from the Sphinx position, which is propped up on your elbows, lying on your front. So that's where I'm going to start the tutorial. Now, if you haven't started an exercise from the Sphinx position, just bear in mind that it's going to be placing your lumbar spine into extension. Your low back will be arched. So if you go down into the setup and you feel there's discomfort, tightness, excessive compression in the base of your spine, you probably want to get a small pillow or cushion to lift up that lower part of the body, and that should solve that problem. Now, if your back is quite stiff from top to bottom, you may find that one of the ways your body tries to make it more comfortable for you is to let your ribcage sink between your shoulders. That does decompress and take the stress off the back, but at what cost? The integrity of the shoulder is really compromised here. So make sure that when you're in your start position that you can lift your ribcage up as if you've been hooked between your shoulder blades and pulled backwards. And that should protect the shoulders, get them a little bit happier, and also establish a better neck position. What you don't want to be is with your head sunk, or even worse still, looking up and forwards. We want a neutral position, as if you're holding an orange between your chin and chest can be helpful to think about to get into the correct start. So now we're in a good Sphinx position. We can think back to those two lines of the body, the lower rib cage and the belt line. Take a breath in to prepare your movement, and as you breathe out, pull those two lines together in your mind. And that will cause the abdominal wall to shorten, to contract, and that brings about this lifting, which denotes the preparatory plank position. I'm just going to lower down before we continue. So by actively visualizing those two elements, the rib cage and the belt line being drawn towards each other, we can contract the abdominal muscles. It's not a big lift. You see, as I come up, I'm now in a modified plank position where there's essentially a straight line between the crown of my head and my knees. And that's where we want to get to. Now, if somebody told you just to bring your hips up off the floor, you might just lift up the hips as if you've been hooked by a back pocket or something. And that often is accompanied with this hinged position where you're using your hip flexors far more than your abdominal muscles. So I really want you to try and think about pulling those two elements together, belt line to rib cage and vice versa, and combine that with drawing up your navel towards your spine. And that should give this kind of vacuum effect, this lifting, this shortening, and promote a far better abdominal activation to get to this modified plank position. Now, once you've got that basic premise, it will become more automatic, and then we can begin adding some variety. So to start with, I would make sure that when you're doing this, you're breathing out to come up, and then breathing in to come down, and just get used to moving with your breath, and making sure that as you perform your up and down movements, that you're not sacrificing your neutral shoulder alignment or your neutral neck position. Now, of course, you're not actually in a neutral shoulder position, it's worth clarifying there, but the start position shouldn't be sacrificed. That's probably a better way of phrasing it. Once you can do multiple repetitions, you probably want to practice holding your modified plank. So coming up as you exhale, you can then draw in that navel and hold for a count of 3 or 4 or 5, and then lower down, making sure that when you hold the position, that there's no shaking, there's no loss of control, and that your stomach is drawn in and stays nice and flat, and you're always thinking about pulling those 2 points together, the belt line and the rib cage, when you're up in your modified plank position. That's quite a good exercise to build up your tolerance to there, making sure your shoulders aren't painful, you want to get up to being able to do 30 or 60 seconds of that, and it's quite a nice endurance core exercise to perform. Once you're very happy with that, we can begin to remove base of support to challenge ourselves and work towards the leg pull element of this exercise series. So coming up into your modified plank, you would then squeeze one knee up away from the floor, so you're just perched on the toes on that side, and then lower down, back to the mat. You can then try the other side, or indeed do one on each. So squeezing the knee up, and then trying the same on the other side. And when you perform the leg movements, we want to look for that beautiful dissociation of movement. As you come up, if there's any change in your body position, a lot of people will lift their hips up to try and cheat on this particular aspect. Try and eliminate that so you're getting the dissociation that really signifies your core stability is working well. Once you can perform multiple repetitions of the little knee squeeze, we can progress to reaching the leg behind us, and there's the pull element, the leg pull up off the floor and then lower down. So it's imperative that when you perform the leg pull that there's no change in your alignment, that your core stability is maintained. And if you're not sure, often a telltale sign can be an increased tension through the base of your spine. If you get any discomfort, or you notice your stomach bulging towards the floor, or you notice a drop in your plank, then go back to the previous level and make sure that you can do a little bit more of that before attempting the leg lift, the leg from the correct initiation and facilitation of the movement to increasing your endurance in that position, gradually bringing off base of support, and finishing up with a full open chain exercise where the leg comes off the floor and you're challenging your core stability far greater with that leg pull movement. There are more advanced levels to this exercise, which I'll cover in another video. But when you're exercising on your front, when you're exercising from the Sphinx position, when you're putting weight through your shoulders for a little bit of a prolonged period of time, make sure that your form is really good, and always try and remember bringing those 2 points together to facilitate the correct sequence needed for this exercise.